The contractions hit me like lightning bolts every 3 minutes. I was gripping the hospital bed rails so hard my knuckles had turned white, and all I could think about was how badly I needed someone, anyone from my family, to just be there with me. Instead, my phone was buzzing nonstop with text messages that made my blood boil even through the pain. Diane, can you Venmo me $400 for rent? Emergency. Need $200 for car repair ASAP. Mom's birthday dinner tonight. Can you cover everyone? It's only $300. Here I was, literally bringing a new life into this world, and to my family, I was still nothing more than a walking ATM machine. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The whole mess started 3 years ago when I landed my job as a senior financial analyst at Morrison & Associates in downtown Chicago. After years of scraping by on entry-level salaries and living paycheck to paycheck, I was finally making real money, $95,000 a year to be exact. For the first time in my adult life, I had savings. I could afford decent groceries, and I wasn't lying awake at night wondering how I'd pay rent. My family noticed the change immediately. Josh, my older brother, was the first to come calling. He'd been bouncing between construction jobs for years, never quite finding his footing after dropping out of community college. One Tuesday evening, he showed up at my apartment in Lincoln Park with a 6-pack of beer and that sheepish grin he'd perfected since childhood. "Diane, you're looking good," he said, scanning my newly furnished living room. "This place is nice, really nice. I should have seen it coming." Within 20 minutes, he was laying out his sob story about how his truck needed new tires and his landlord was threatening eviction. "I just need a little help getting back on my feet," he said. "Maybe $1,500? I'll pay you back as soon as I get this new job lined up." The new job never materialized. Neither did my $1,500. Elizabeth was next. My younger sister had always been the dramatic one in the family, prone to crisis after crisis that somehow always required financial rescue. She called me at work one afternoon, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words through the phone. "Diane, please, I don't know what else to do," she wailed. "Marcus left me and I can't afford the apartment by myself. The lease isn't up for 6 months, and if I break it early, they want $3,000. I'll be homeless. I'll literally be living in my car." Elizabeth had a flair for catastrophizing, but the tears sounded genuine. I found myself agreeing to cover her lease-breaking fee, plus another $2,000 to help her get settled in a cheaper place. "This is just temporary," she promised. "I'm already looking for a second job." The second job lasted exactly 2 weeks before she quit because her manager was totally unreasonable for expecting her to show up on time. Then there was Patricia, my stepmother, who'd married my dad when I was in high school. Patricia had a talent for making every conversation about money sound like a family obligation rather than a request. She'd call during my lunch breaks with updates about Dad's health. His blood pressure medication was expensive. The copays for his physical therapy were adding up. And wouldn't it be wonderful if the family could all chip in to help? Of course, by family, she meant me. Josh was barely keeping his own head above water, and Elizabeth was still between opportunities. I was the only one with steady income, which apparently made me responsible for everyone else's financial emergencies. "Your father is so proud of how successful you've become," Patricia would say, her voice taking on that particular tone that made my stomach clench. "He always talks about how you're the responsible one, the one who really has her life together. It would mean so much to him if you could help with just this one thing." Just this one thing turned into a pattern. Dad's car registration. Emergency. Dental work for Patricia's daughter from her first marriage. A small loan to help them avoid late fees on their mortgage. Each request came with the same emotional manipulation wrapped in family guilt, and somehow I always found myself opening my banking app and transferring money I'd worked 60-hour weeks to earn. The breaking point should have come during Christmas, last year. I'd already spent over $2,000 on gifts for everyone, plus I'd covered the cost of Christmas dinner at Patricia's insistence. You know how tight things are for us right now, and you're so generous. But apparently my generosity had a limit they were determined to test. Elizabeth cornered me in Patricia's kitchen while I was loading the dishwasher after dinner. "Diane, I hate to ask, but I'm in a really bad spot," she whispered, glancing toward the living room where everyone else was watching football. "I kind of overextended myself on Christmas gifts, and my credit card payment is due tomorrow. If it's late, they'll jack up my interest rate, and I'll never get caught up." "How much?" I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. "Just 800. I swear I'll pay you back from my tax refund." I'd heard that song before, but it was Christmas and she was family. I transferred the money from my phone right there in Patricia's kitchen, watching my savings account balance drop by another $800. But Elizabeth wasn't done. "Actually," she said, not meeting my eyes, "could you make it an even 1,000? I just remembered I owe my roommate for utilities, and she's been really cool about waiting." By New Year's Day, I'd calculated that I'd given my family over $18,000 in the past year. $18,000 that had evaporated without a trace, leaving me with nothing but a bunch of empty promises and the growing realization that my family saw me as a solution to their problems rather than a person with problems of my own. 3. Pregnancy news came in February. Derek and I had been trying for 8 months, and when that little plus sign finally appeared on the test, I felt a surge of joy mixed with terror. We were ready. We'd been saving money, preparing the spare bedroom, talking about names and schools and all the dreams parents have for their children. What I wasn't prepared for was how quickly my family would try to turn my pregnancy into their financial opportunity. Josh was first, as usual. "Congratulations, sis," he said when I broke the news over dinner at our usual spot downtown. "That's amazing. Really amazing. You know, I've been thinking about getting my life together, especially now that I'm going to be an uncle. I've got this opportunity to get into a trade program, welding certification, but I need to pay the tuition up front. It's only $3,000, and once I'm certified, I'll be making real money, enough to pay you back and then some." The trade program was apparently starting in 6 weeks, which coincidentally was exactly when I'd be eligible for maternity leave. The timing couldn't have been worse for a $3,000 loan, but Josh had perfected the art of making his problems sound like investments in his future. Elizabeth took a different approach. She started sending me links to baby articles with messages like, "Isn't this nursery gorgeous? I bet you could do something similar," and "Look at this organic baby food maker. Only $400. When I didn't take the bait, she switched to direct. Emotional manipulation. "I'm so excited to be an aunt," she gushed during one of our coffee dates. "I can't wait to spoil this baby. I already have so many ideas for gifts, but honestly, money's been really tight lately. My car needs inspection, and they're saying it needs all kinds of work before it'll pass. I was hoping maybe you could help me out so I can get it fixed and start picking up more shifts at the restaurant. More shifts means more money for baby presents." Patricia was the most brazen of all. She called me at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday, just 2 weeks after I'd shared the pregnancy news. "Diane, honey, I hope I didn't wake you," she said, though her tone suggested she didn't particularly care if she had. "I wanted to talk to you about something important. Your father and I have been discussing the baby, and we think it would be wonderful if we could set aside some money for the child's future. You know, college fund, that sort of thing." I felt a warm flutter of gratitude before she continued. "The thing is, we're in a bit of a bind right now. Your father's hours got cut back at the warehouse, and our savings account is pretty much wiped out from all the medical bills. But I had an idea. What if you helped us get caught up on our mortgage payments, and then we could take what we would have spent on those payments and put it away for the baby instead? It would probably be around $2,000 a month, just temporarily, until your dad's hours pick back up. $2,000 a month. While I was pregnant. while I was trying to save money for maternity leave and prepare for the massive expenses that come with a new baby. Patricia, I don't think that's going to work, I said carefully. Derek and I are trying to build up our own savings right now with the baby coming. Of course, she said quickly. I totally understand. It's just that family helps family, you know? And this money would ultimately be for your child's benefit. But if you can't swing the full amount, maybe we could start smaller. Even $1,000 a month would make such a difference. The guilt trips became relentless as my pregnancy progressed. Every family gathering turned into an opportunity for someone to mention their latest financial crisis, always with the subtle implication that I was in the best position to help. Every phone call included updates about money troubles, job losses, unexpected expenses, medical bills, car repairs, and rent increases. By my second trimester, I'd given them another $12,000. $12,000 that should have been going toward the nursery, toward my maternity leave fund, toward the 1,001 expenses that come with preparing for a baby. The worst part wasn't even the money itself. It was the way they made me feel selfish for having any hesitation. When I suggested that maybe Josh should look into payment plans for his welding program, Patricia jumped in with, "Diane, I'm surprised. You're not more supportive of your brother trying to better himself." When I mentioned that Elizabeth might want to consider picking up more shifts instead of asking for money, Josh accused me of not understanding how hard it is out there for people who aren't as lucky as you. Lucky, as if my success had fallen from the sky instead of being the result of years of 60-hour work weeks, night classes, and sacrificing every luxury to build a career. The breaking point came during my third trimester, when I was 34 weeks pregnant and feeling like a beached whale. I'd been having Braxton Hicks contractions all week, and my doctor had warned me to take it easy and watch for signs of early labor. That's when Elizabeth called with her latest crisis. "Diane, I'm freaking out," she said, her voice shaking. "I just got served with eviction papers. My landlord is saying I'm 3 months behind on rent, which is totally unfair because I've been making partial payments. But he wants the full amount, $1,800 by Friday, or I'm out." "Elizabeth, how did you get 3 months behind?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm despite the fact that I could feel my blood pressure rising. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. "It's not my fault," she said defensively. "Work has been really slow, and I had that whole situation with my car breaking down, remember? Plus, I had to help Mom with her medical bills. And then there was that whole thing with my roommate moving out without paying her share of utilities." The excuses went on, but I'd heard them all before. What made this conversation different was what came next. "Look, I know you're pregnant and everything, but you're still working, right? And it's not like you need that money right now for the baby. You've got like 6 more weeks. This is literally life or death for me. I'll be homeless. Life or death for her." While I was carrying her future niece or nephew and trying to prepare for the biggest change in my life. "I can't, Elizabeth," I said firmly. "I'm sorry, but I can't keep bailing everyone out. I have my own expenses right now." "Fine," she snapped. "I guess I know where I stand with my own sister. I guess having money is more important than family." She hung up on me. That night, I sat in the nursery. Derek and I had been preparing, surrounded by half-assembled furniture and boxes of baby clothes, and I calculated exactly how much money I'd given my family since getting my job. The number was staggering. $38,000 over 3 years. $38,000 that could have paid off my student loans, funded my entire maternity leave, and set up a college fund for my daughter. Instead, I had nothing to show for it except a family that treated me like their personal ATM machine and got angry when I finally tried to set boundaries. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Elizabeth had apparently spent the night texting everyone in the family about how I'd abandoned her in her time of need. Josh was demanding I call him immediately to explain myself. Patricia had sent a long, passive-aggressive message about how disappointed Dad would be to know I was turning my back on family. But the message that broke something inside me came from Elizabeth herself, sent at 3:47 a.m. I hope you're happy with your money while your sister is sleeping in her car. Some people never forget where they came from, but apparently you have. Don't expect me to be there for you when the baby comes if you can't be there for me now. I stared at that message for a long time, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. Don't expect me to be there when the baby comes, as if she'd ever been there for me for anything that didn't involve money. That message from Elizabeth was the catalyst I needed. Something shifted inside me as I read those words over and over again. The audacity of threatening to abandon me during childbirth because I wouldn't fund her latest crisis hit me like a physical blow. I screenshot every single message from that night. Every guilt trip, every manipulation tactic, every demand for money. Then I did something I'd never done before. I started documenting everything. I went through 3 years of bank statements, text messages, and emails, creating a detailed spreadsheet of every dollar I'd given them. The numbers were even worse than I'd remembered. Josh alone had received $14,200 across 12 different emergencies. Elizabeth had collected $16,800 through 23 separate requests. Patricia and Dad had gotten $7,000 for various medical and household crises. But what really made my stomach turn was seeing the pattern laid out so clearly. Every major milestone in my life had been overshadowed by their financial demands. My promotion celebration dinner, cut short by Josh calling about needing bail money for a DUI. My birthday last year, Elizabeth spent the entire evening complaining about her student loan payments until I finally offered to cover them for 3 months. The week Derek proposed, Patricia called daily about Dad's prescription costs until I agreed to set up a monthly automatic transfer. They'd turned every moment of joy in my life into an opportunity to extract money. Derek found me in the nursery that evening, surrounded by printouts and bank statements, my laptop open to spreadsheet after spreadsheet. He'd been supportive but increasingly frustrated with my family's behavior throughout the pregnancy. "Diane, what's all this?" he asked, settling his hand on my shoulder. I showed him everything. The messages, the calculations, the patterns I'd uncovered. His face grew darker as he read through Elizabeth's 3 a.m. texts. "She threatened to abandon you during labor because you wouldn't give her rent money?" His voice was tight with controlled anger. "While you're 8 months pregnant?" "It gets worse," I said, pulling up Josh's messages from that morning. "Look at this." Josh had sent a series of increasingly aggressive texts starting at 6 a.m. "Elizabeth told me what happened. Really disappointed in you right now. Family is supposed to stick together. You've changed since you got that fancy job. Maybe you need to remember that we were there for you before you had money." That last line made Derek laugh, but not with humor. "We're there for you? When exactly? When you were working 2 jobs to put yourself through college? When you were eating ramen noodles for dinner 6 nights a week? I've been with you for 4 years, Diane, and I've never seen any of them there for you for anything except to ask for money." He was right, and I knew it. I tried to remember a single time any of them had offered emotional support, practical help, or even just showed up. Without wanting something, the memories wouldn't come because they didn't exist. My phone buzzed with another message from Patricia. "Your father is very hurt by your behavior toward Elizabeth. He raised you better than this. Please call me so we can work this out as a family." "That's it," Derek said, watching me read the message. "You need to block all of them until after the baby comes. This stress isn't good for you or our daughter." But I wasn't ready to block them yet. I had a different plan forming in my mind. Over the next 2 weeks, I carefully crafted my response. Not an emotional outburst or angry confrontation, but a systematic dismantling of their manipulative tactics. I created a professional-looking document titled Family Financial History, a 3-year analysis, and included every transaction, every broken promise, every guilt trip, and every threat. The document was 12 pages long and devastating in its clarity. It showed not just the money, though $38,000 was certainly significant, but the emotional manipulation that had made me feel guilty for having boundaries. It documented how they'd turned my pregnancy into another opportunity for extraction, rather than a time for support and celebration. But the real masterstroke was the final section. Moving forward, new family financial policy. I outlined exactly how things would change. No more emergency loans without written repayment agreements and collateral. No more guilt trips about family loyalty when I declined to fund their poor decisions. No more using family gatherings as opportunities to pressure me for money. And most importantly, no more treating my pregnancy and upcoming maternity leave as irrelevant to my financial situation. I sent the document to all 3 of them simultaneously on a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., along with a brief message. I've taken some time to analyze our family's financial dynamics over the past 3 years. Please review the attached document carefully. We need to have some serious conversations about boundaries and respect. The silence lasted exactly 47 minutes. Josh called first, his voice tight with rage. "What the hell is this, Diane? Are you seriously keeping spreadsheets on your own family? This is sick." "It's documentation," I replied calmly. "Every number in there comes from bank records and text messages. If you think it's sick, maybe you should examine why the pattern looks so disturbing when laid out objectively." "You can't put a price on family," he shot back. "We're not business associates. We're blood." "Exactly," I said. "We're family, which means you should care about my well-being instead of just seeing me as a source of funding. When's the last time you asked how I'm feeling about becoming a mother? Or whether I need help preparing for the baby? Or even just how my day was without it leading to a request for money?" The question hung in the air because we both knew the answer. He couldn't remember because it had never happened. Elizabeth's response came via a 15-minute voicemail that started with fake laughter and devolved into tears. "I can't believe you're treating your own sister like this. Making charts and graphs about helping your family? What's wrong with you? I never asked you to keep track of every penny. If you didn't want to help, you should have just said no." But that was the problem. I had said no multiple times, and they'd worn me down with guilt trips and emotional manipulation until I caved. The spreadsheet simply made their tactics visible in a way that couldn't be dismissed or rewritten. Patricia's response was the most calculated. She waited 3 days, then called with her most reasonable, concerned voice. "Diane, honey, I'm worried about you. This kind of behavior, making lists about family members, keeping financial records like we're strangers, it's not healthy. I think the pregnancy hormones might be affecting your judgment." The pregnancy hormones. She was actually trying to dismiss my legitimate concerns as irrational mood swings caused by being pregnant. "Patricia," I said, my voice deadly calm, "I'm a financial analyst. Making detailed records and identifying problematic patterns is literally what I do for a living. This has nothing to do with hormones and everything to do with 3 years of financial exploitation that I've finally decided to address." "Exploitation?" Her voice rose an octave. "Honey, that's your family you're talking about. We've never exploited you. We've just asked for help during tough times, and you've been generous enough to provide it. That's what families do." "Families also show up for each other without expecting payment," I replied. "They celebrate each other's successes without immediately calculating how much money they can extract. They support each other during major life changes instead of treating them as inconvenient obstacles to their financial requests." The conversation ended with Patricia hanging up on me, but not before she delivered her parting shot. "Your father is going to be heartbroken when he sees what kind of person you've become." What kind of person I'd become? A person with boundaries. A person who refused to be treated like an ATM machine. A a person who was finally putting her unborn child's needs ahead of her family's endless financial crises. 3 days later, I was at my 36-week appointment when Dr. Martinez noticed my blood pressure was elevated. "Any additional stress at home?" she asked, making notes in my chart. I found myself telling her everything: the money, the guilt trips, the threats, the way my family had turned my pregnancy into another opportunity for financial extraction. She listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. "Diane," she said when I finished, "what you're describing sounds like financial abuse. The pattern of exploitation, the emotional manipulation, the way they're dismissing your needs during pregnancy, these are serious red flags." Financial abuse. I'd never thought of it in those terms, but hearing a medical professional use that phrase made something click into place. "The stress you're experiencing could potentially trigger early labor," Dr. Martinez continued. "For your health and your baby's health, you need to minimize contact with these stressors until after delivery. Can you do that?" I thought about Elizabeth's threat to abandon me during labor, about Josh's anger when I tried to set boundaries, about Patricia's dismissal of my concerns as pregnancy hormones. "Actually," I said, "I think I can." That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I blocked all 3 of them on social media, blocked their phone numbers, and changed my email settings to send their messages directly to spam. Then I did something even more significant. I scheduled a meeting with a family law attorney to discuss my options for protecting my daughter from this cycle of manipulation. The attorney, Margaret Chen, was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She listened to my story and reviewed my documentation with the same professional detachment I brought to financial analysis. "You have excellent records," she said approvingly. "This level of documentation will be very helpful if you need to establish patterns of harassment or financial coercion in the future." "Is it really that serious?" I asked. "Mrs. Rodriguez, you've given your family nearly $40,000 over 3 years under emotional duress. They've responded to your attempts at setting boundaries with threats and manipulation, and they're actively trying to interfere with your medical care by causing stress during a high-risk pregnancy stage. Yes, it's that serious." She helped me draft a formal cease and desist letter outlining that any further attempts to contact me, show up at my workplace, or interfere with my medical care would result in legal action. The letter also made it clear that I considered all previous financial assistance to be gifts with no expectation of repayment, but that no further assistance would be provided under any circumstances. "Will this actually stop them?" I asked. Margaret smiled grimly. "In my experience, people who are used to getting their way through manipulation don't give up easily. But having legal documentation of your boundaries makes it much easier to enforce them if they escalate their behavior." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a notification. Someone was calling from an unknown number, probably one of them trying to get around the blocks I'd put in place. I looked at Margaret and turned off my phone entirely. "That," she said with approval, "is exactly the right response." The silence from my family lasted exactly 9 days. 9 blissful days where I could focus on preparing for my daughter's arrival without constant financial demands buzzing through my phone. Derek and I finished setting up the nursery, attended our final birthing class, and actually had conversations about baby names and feeding schedules instead of which family member needed money for what crisis. Then Josh showed up at my office. Was reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant, Maria, knocked on my office door with an uncomfortable expression. "Diane, there's a man here to see you. He says he's your brother, but he's not on your visitor list, and honestly, he seems pretty agitated." Through the glass wall of my office, I could see Josh pacing in the reception area, his work boots leaving muddy prints on the polished floors. He was gesturing animatedly at Maria's desk, clearly frustrated that she wouldn't let him back to see me immediately. "Call security," I told Maria quietly. "And if he asks, Tell him I'm in a meeting and can't be disturbed." But Josh had apparently spotted me through the glass. He pointed directly at me and raised his voice loud enough that I could hear him through the wall. "I can see her right there. Diane, stop hiding behind your secretary and talk to me." The entire office floor turned to look. My coworkers' faces showed a mixture of curiosity and concern as they watched my brother create a scene in our professional environment. Heat flooded my cheeks as I realized he was about to make a spectacle that would follow me for months. Security arrived within 3 minutes. 2 professional-looking men in suits who approached Josh with calm authority. I watched through my office window as they spoke to him in low voices, gesturing toward the elevators. Josh's face grew red as he argued with them, pointing repeatedly at my office. Finally, one of the security guards approached Maria's desk and she pointed toward my office. He knocked on my door. "Ma'am, we can escort your visitor off the premises, but he's insisting he needs to deliver an urgent family message. He says it's about your father's health. Would you like to speak with him? Briefly, or should we remove him?" My father's health. Of course they'd use Dad as leverage, the one family member I still had genuine concern for, despite Patricia's manipulations. "Give me 2 minutes with him," I said. "But stay close." I walked out to the reception area where Josh was now standing, with his arms crossed, looking like a defiant teenager despite being 32 years old. Every eye in the office was on us. "You have 1 minute," I said quietly. "What's wrong with Dad?" "Nothing's wrong with Dad," Josh snapped. "I just knew you wouldn't talk to me otherwise. What the hell is wrong with you, Diane? Blocking your own family? Sending legal letters like we're strangers?" The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. "You lied about Dad being sick to get past security?" "I needed to talk to you." "You won't answer your phone. You're ignoring Elizabeth completely. And Patricia says you threatened legal action if she contacts you." "Over what? Money? Since when do you care more about money than family?" "Since you made me choose between having a family and being financially abused," I replied, aware that my voice was carrying across the office. "Since Elizabeth threatened to abandon me during childbirth because I wouldn't pay her rent. Since Patricia tried to dismiss my legitimate concerns as pregnancy hormones." Josh's face twisted with frustration. "Elizabeth was upset. She didn't mean that about the hospital, and Patricia never—" "Time's up," I interrupted. "Security will escort you out. If you show up at my workplace again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." "You can't be serious," he said, but the security guards were already moving closer. "Diane, come on. We're family. You can't just cut us off because we ask for help sometimes." "Sometimes?" The word came out louder than I intended. "Josh, you've asked me for money 37 separate times in 3 years. That's not sometimes. That's a systematic pattern of financial exploitation." "Exploitation?" He said the word like it tasted bitter. "I never forced you to give me anything. You offered." After hours of guilt trips and emotional manipulation, yes, I offered. That's how abuse works. You wear someone down until they comply, and then act like it was their choice. The word abuse hung in the air between us. Josh's face went through several expressions: surprise, denial, anger, and finally something that might have been recognition. "That's not— we never—" he started, then stopped. For just a moment, I saw a flicker of awareness cross his features, as if he was seeing our interactions from my perspective for the first time. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by defensive anger. "You know what? Fine. If that's how you want to see your own family, then maybe you're right to cut us off. Maybe we're better off without someone who thinks helping your brother is abuse." He turned to leave, then stopped and delivered his parting shot. "But don't expect us to come running when you need help with that baby. Don't expect us to be there for birthdays and holidays and all the family stuff you're going to want later. You made your choice." The threat was clear, Comply with our financial demands or lose your family entirely. It was the same manipulation they'd always used, just stated more explicitly. I understand, I said calmly. I'm comfortable with that choice. Josh stared at me for a long moment, apparently expecting me to back down or negotiate. When I didn't, he shook his head in disgust and walked toward the elevators with security flanking him. I went back to my office and closed the door, aware that I was shaking slightly. Maria appeared with a cup of tea and a sympathetic expression. Are you okay? She asked. That looked intense. I'm fine, I said, accepting the tea gratefully. Just some family drama. It's handled now. But it wasn't handled, and I knew it. That evening, my phone, which I'd unblocked temporarily to check for any legitimate emergencies, exploded with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Friends of Elizabeth's, relatives I barely knew, family friends who had apparently been recruited to guilt me back into compliance. The messages followed predictable patterns. I heard about the situation with your family. Elizabeth is really struggling right now. Family is the most important thing. Maybe you could work something out. Your brother seems really hurt. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. What struck me wasn't the content of the messages. It was the coordination. Someone had clearly reached out to an entire network of people, painted me as the villain, and asked them to pressure me into reconciliation. The level of organization required for this campaign was actually impressive, if you ignored how manipulative it was. But the message that stopped me cold came from someone I hadn't heard from in years. My college roommate, Sarah Chen. Hey, Diane. I got a weird call from someone claiming to be your sister. She was asking me to reach out to you about some family emergency. She had my number somehow and knew details about our college days. I told her I'd pass along her message, but honestly, it felt really off. She seemed to know a lot about your current situation and kept emphasizing how much money you make now. Just wanted you to know someone's been reaching out to your old contacts. Call me if you need anything. They were contacting people from my past, people who knew me before I had money, trying to recruit them into their pressure campaign. The violation of privacy was breathtaking, but it also revealed just how desperate they were becoming. I forwarded Sarah's message to Margaret Chen, my attorney, along with screenshots of all the other messages I'd received. Her response was swift and furious. This level of harassment is unacceptable and potentially illegal. We're filing for a restraining order immediately. Save every message, document every contact attempt, and do not respond to any of them. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. I was 38 weeks pregnant, uncomfortable and exhausted, but I knew I had to see this through. The alternative was bringing my daughter into a world where her mother was treated as a family ATM machine, where boundaries didn't exist, and where emotional manipulation was the primary form of communication. Dr. Martinez had been monitoring my blood pressure closely since the office incident with Josh. The stress from this situation is having real physical effects, she warned me. Your blood pressure is consistently elevated, and you're showing signs of pregnancy-induced hypertension. We need to consider inducing labor if your family continues this harassment. The irony wasn't lost on me. Their behavior was literally threatening the health of the grandchild and niece they claimed to care about. On Wednesday night, exactly one day before the restraining order hearing, I went into labor naturally. The contractions started around 10 p.m., just strong enough to wake me from sleep, but spaced far enough apart that Derek and I knew we had time. By 2 a.m., they were 5 minutes apart and getting stronger. We made the drive to Northwestern Memorial Hospital through empty Chicago streets, my phone buzzing constantly with messages from unknown numbers. The harassment campaign was still in full swing, even as I was literally in labor. Turn it off, Derek said as another message came through. Today is about us and our daughter, not them. I powered down the phone completely and handed it to Derek. Whatever was happening in the world of family drama could wait. I had more important things to focus on. But as we pulled into the hospital parking lot, I saw something that made my blood run cold, despite the waves of contractions. Patricia's silver Honda was parked near the emergency entrance, and Elizabeth's beat-up Toyota was right next to it. They were here. Somehow they'd found out I was in labor, and they'd come to the hospital. The one place I'd hoped to be safe from their manipulation was about to become another battleground. Derek spotted them too. "Are you kidding me right now?" he muttered, pulling into a parking space as far from their cars as possible. "They're actually here, at the hospital, while you're in labor." Another contraction hit me as we sat in the car, stronger this time, and I gripped Derek's hand until it passed. Through the windshield, I could see Patricia pacing near the emergency room entrance, checking her phone constantly. Elizabeth was smoking a cigarette despite the no-smoking signs, flicking ash onto the sidewalk with agitated movements. "We need to get inside," Derek said, checking the time. "Your contractions are getting closer together." "I can't deal with them right now," I gasped as another wave of pain rolled through me. "I literally cannot handle their drama while I'm trying to give birth." Derek was already on his phone, calling the hospital's main number. "Hi, this is Derek Rodriguez. My wife is in active labor and we're about to enter your facility, but there are some family members here who have been harassing her. She has documentation of this harassment and pending legal action. Is there a private entrance we can use?" The answer was yes. Northwestern Memorial had protocols for exactly this situation: domestic disputes, restraining order violations, and family harassment that could compromise patient care. Security met us at the staff entrance on the north side of the building and escorted us directly to the labor and delivery floor through service elevators that bypassed the main lobby entirely. "Ma'am, we'll need to put you on our restricted visitor list," the security supervisor, Officer Williams, explained as we walked. "No one gets access to your room or information about your care without your explicit written consent. We'll also station someone near the elevators to this floor." I was simultaneously grateful for the protection and furious that it was necessary. What kind of people show up to harass someone during childbirth? The answer to that question became clear 2 hours later, when I was settled in my delivery room, and my labor was progressing rapidly. Officer Williams knocked on the door with an update that made my jaw drop. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I thought you should know. Your family members have been in the lobby for the past hour demanding information about your condition. They've told multiple staff members that there's been a family emergency, and they need to see you immediately." When we explained our visitor restrictions, one of them threatened to call the police and report a kidnapping. "A kidnapping?" Derek's voice cracked with disbelief. "She's having a baby, not being held hostage." "It gets worse," Officer Williams continued. "They've also been approaching other patients' families in the waiting area, asking if anyone has seen a pregnant woman matching your description. They're essentially trying to crowdsource information about your whereabouts." Another contraction interrupted the conversation, this one strong enough to make me forget about family drama entirely. My daughter was coming, whether my relatives were downstairs causing chaos or not. But 30 minutes later, as I was entering the transition phase of labor, the most intense part where the pain becomes overwhelming and you feel like you might actually die, my nurse Jennifer came in with a concerned expression. "Diane, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. Someone claiming to be your mother is demanding access to your room. She's insisting that you specifically requested her presence and that our staff is violating your wishes by keeping her out." "My mother died when I was 12, I said through gritted teeth as another contraction peaked. "That's my stepmother and she's lying." That's what I figured, but she's becoming increasingly aggressive with our front desk staff. She's now claiming that you're having complications and your family has a right to know about the baby's condition. The manipulation was breathtaking. Patricia was literally inventing medical emergencies to gain access to information she had no right to have. "Can you ban them from the hospital entirely?" Derek asked. "We can issue a trespass warning, but they're technically not doing anything illegal by sitting in a public waiting area," Jennifer explained. However, if they continue harassing staff or other patients, we can have them arrested for disorderly conduct. That's when Elizabeth apparently decided to escalate things further. At 4:17 a.m., just as I was beginning to push, Jennifer burst into the room with 2 security officers and a hospital administrator I'd never seen before. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I apologize for the interruption, but your sister has just called 911 claiming that you're being held against your will in this hospital and prevented from seeing your family during a medical emergency." I stared at her in complete shock. Even between contractions, the audacity of what Elizabeth had done was stunning. She called 911 to report my childbirth as a kidnapping? "Emergency services are on their way," the administrator confirmed. "When they arrive, they'll need to verify your condition and confirm that you're here voluntarily. It should only take a few minutes, but I wanted to prepare you." Derek looked like he was about to explode. "This is insane. She's in active labor. Our daughter is crowning, and they're sending the police because her sister is having a tantrum in the lobby?" "Unfortunately, we have to take all emergency calls seriously," the administrator said apologetically. "But once the responding officers confirm that this is a false report, your sister could face charges for filing a fraudulent emergency claim." The EMTs and police officers arrived just as my daughter's head emerged. There I was, literally in the process of giving birth, having to pause between pushes to confirm to law enforcement that I was not, in fact, being kidnapped by hospital staff. "Ma'am, are you here voluntarily?" Officer Martinez asked, diplomatically keeping his eyes focused on my face rather than the medical situation happening below. "Yes, I'm here voluntarily," I panted. "I'm having a baby. My family has been financially abusing me for 3 years, and I've blocked contact with them. I have legal documentation of their harassment pattern." "And you don't want them present for the birth?" "I want them arrested for filing a false police report and banned from this hospital," I said as another contraction built. "But first, I need to finish having this baby." Officer Martinez nodded and stepped out to coordinate with hospital security. Jennifer encouraged me to keep pushing, and at 4:43 a.m., my daughter Emma Catherine Rodriguez entered the world, healthy, beautiful, and completely unaware that her extended family had just tried to weaponize emergency services to gain access to her birth. But the real shock came an hour later, after Emma had been cleaned and weighed and was nursing peacefully in my arms. Officer Williams returned with an update that left me speechless. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I thought you'd want to know what happened downstairs. When the EMTs confirmed that the emergency call was fraudulent, your sister was arrested for filing a false police report. But while she was being processed, your stepmother apparently decided to escalate further." "What did she do now?" Derek asked, stroking Emma's tiny hand. "She called Channel 7 News and told them that Northwestern Memorial was participating in a family kidnapping cover-up. She claimed that you were being held against your will to prevent your family from seeing their newborn grandchild, and that the hospital was violating patient rights by restricting family access." I stared at him in complete disbelief. "She called the news? About my childbirth? A news van is currently in our parking lot. Your stepmother gave them an interview claiming that your husband has isolated you from your family and that you're being manipulated into cutting off contact with people who love you. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Patricia was on television claiming that Derek was manipulating me, while she herself was literally trying to manipulate news media into pressuring the hospital to violate my privacy rights." "What did you tell the reporters?" Derek asked. "Hospital policy is to never discuss patient information with the media, but our public relations department issued a statement confirming that we follow all HIPAA regulations and that patient privacy is our top priority. They also noted that we have security footage of the family members' behavior in our lobby, which contradicts their claims about being denied reasonable access. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I looked down at my perfect, peaceful daughter, then at Derek, then at Officer Williams. I want to press charges, I said quietly, against all of them. Elizabeth for the false police report, Patricia for harassment and attempting to involve the media in private medical information, and Josh for trespassing at my workplace. I want restraining orders that protect not just me, but my daughter." "Are you sure?" Officer Williams asked. "This will likely become public record, and it sounds like they've already involved media attention." I thought about Emma's future, about what kind of family I wanted her to grow up around, about whether I wanted her to learn that love comes with financial strings attached, that family loyalty means accepting abuse, and that boundaries are suggestions rather than requirements. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "I want it all documented. Every harassment attempt, every manipulation tactic, every violation of privacy. If they want to make this public, then let's make sure the whole truth comes out." Derek squeezed my hand. "Whatever you decide, I support you completely." That afternoon, while I was recovering and bonding with Emma, Margaret Chen arrived with a stack of legal documents and a grim smile. "Diane, what they did last night crossed several legal lines. Filing false emergency reports, harassment, attempting to manipulate media coverage of private medical information. We have grounds for multiple charges and a comprehensive restraining order." "What does that mean practically?" I asked. "It means they can't contact you, your husband, or your daughter through any means. They can't come within 500 feet of your home, workplace, or Emma's future schools. They can't use third parties to contact you or spread false information about your family. And if they violate these orders, they face immediate arrest and jail time." That evening, as Derek and I sat in our hospital room watching Emma sleep in her bassinet, my phone buzzed. With a single text message from an unknown number, saw the news story. "We never meant for things to go this far. Can we please just talk?" It was Josh. I showed the message to Derek, then deleted it without responding. Then I powered off the phone completely and handed it to him. "From now on, you handle all the technology," I said. "I just want to focus on our daughter." And for the first time in 3 years, I felt completely, genuinely at peace. 3 months after Emma's birth, the legal proceedings were finally complete. Elizabeth pled guilty to filing a false police report and received 6 months of probation plus community service. Patricia was charged with harassment and ordered to pay fines totaling $2,800. Josh faced trespassing charges and was banned from my office building permanently. All 3 were subject to comprehensive restraining orders that would remain in effect for 5 years. But the real victory wasn't the legal consequences, it was the silence. For the first time since I'd gotten my promotion 3 years earlier, my phone wasn't constantly buzzing with financial demands disguised as family emergencies. Emma and I could take walks around Lincoln Park without me scanning every corner for familiar faces. Derek could answer our home phone without screening calls first. The peace was transformative in ways I hadn't expected. Without the constant stress of managing their crises and guilt trips, I discovered I had energy for things I'd forgotten I enjoyed. I started reading again, actual books for pleasure, not just financial reports. Derek and I began cooking elaborate meals together while Emma napped, something we'd talked about doing for years but never had the mental bandwidth to attempt. Most surprisingly, I found myself sleeping through the night even when Emma was fussy. The anxiety that had plagued me for years, that constant low-level worry about who would need money next and how I could possibly say no, simply evaporated. Margaret Chen called me on a Tuesday morning in late July with news that made me laugh, out loud. "Diane, you're not going to believe this," she said, and I could hear the amusement in her voice. "I just got off the phone with Patricia's attorney. She wants to negotiate a modification to the restraining order." "What kind of modification?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "She's claiming that the financial stress of the legal fees and fines has created a hardship, and she's requesting permission to contact you for a loan to cover her attorney costs." The audacity was breathtaking, even by Patricia's standards. She wanted the restraining order modified so she could ask me for money to pay for the legal consequences of harassing me. "What did you tell her attorney?" I asked. I told him that if his client contacts my client for any reason, including requests for financial assistance to pay legal fees resulting from her own criminal behavior, she'll be arrested for violating a court order. He hung up pretty quickly after that. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at work. Maria knocked on my office door with a puzzled expression and a business card in her hand. "Diane, there's a woman here from Channel 7 News. She says she's following up on a story from a few months ago and would like to interview you about family financial abuse. Should I tell her you're unavailable?" Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 had been the reporter who covered Patricia's claims about hospital conspiracies during Emma's birth. According to Margaret, the story had aired exactly once before the station realized they'd been manipulated and pulled it from further broadcasts. "Send her back," I said after a moment's consideration. "I think it's time people heard the real story." Jennifer Walsh was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a professional demeanor that immediately put me at ease. She set up a small camera in my office and explained her purpose. "Mrs. Rodriguez, we've been investigating a pattern of false emergency reports and media manipulation in the Chicago area. Your stepmother's claims about hospital kidnapping led us down a rabbit hole of similar cases where family members use emergency services and media attention to pressure relatives into financial compliance." "How common is this?" I asked. "More common than you'd think. We've identified at least a dozen cases in the past 2 years where family members have filed false police reports or contacted the media with fabricated stories when relatives cut off financial support. Your case is unusual because you documented everything so thoroughly." The interview lasted an hour. I walked Jennifer through the 3-year pattern of escalating demands, the systematic emotional manipulation, and the way my pregnancy had been treated as an opportunity for extraction rather than a time-deserving support and celebration. "What would you want other people in similar situations to know?" Jennifer asked as we wrapped up. "That it's not normal," I said firmly. "Family members who truly care about you don't treat major life events as fundraising opportunities. They don't threaten to abandon you during medical emergencies because you won't pay their bills. And they definitely don't call the police and news stations when you try to set boundaries. Any regrets about pursuing legal action?" I thought about Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib at home, about Derek whistling while he made coffee that morning, about the $847 in my savings account that nobody was demanding I transfer to solve someone else's crisis. "None whatsoever," I said. The story aired 2 weeks later as part of a larger investigative piece about financial abuse within families. Jennifer had interviewed experts who explained how economic manipulation often escalates around major life changes, new jobs, marriages, pregnancies, inheritance, or other events that might affect someone's financial situation. The response was overwhelming. My voicemail at work filled up with messages from viewers sharing their own stories of family financial abuse. Margaret's office received calls from people asking about restraining orders and legal protections. The Chicago Department of Family Services reported a spike in calls to their financial abuse hotline, but the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. 2 months after the story aired, Maria brought me a handwritten letter that had been delivered to our office reception desk. The return address showed a name I didn't recognize, Sarah Martinez, with a Chicago zip code I wasn't familiar with. "Dear Mrs. Rodriguez," the letter began, "I saw your interview on Channel 7, and I wanted to thank you for having the courage to speak publicly about family financial abuse. Your story gave me the strength to finally set boundaries with my own family after 15 years of being treated like a personal bank." Sarah went on to explain that her situation had been remarkably similar to mine. A successful career that made her the target of endless financial demands from relatives who had never supported her education or professional development, but felt entitled to the benefits of her success. "Like you, I was made to feel selfish for wanting to save money for my own future, instead of constantly bailing out family members who made poor decisions. Your interview helped me realize that their emergencies weren't actually my emergencies, and that helping someone repeatedly without any expectation of change or personal responsibility isn't helping at all. It's enabling. The letter continued for 3 pages, detailing how Sarah had used my story as a template for setting her own boundaries. She'd documented her family's financial requests, consulted with an attorney, and ultimately pursued legal protection when they refused to respect her decisions. I'm writing because I want you to know that your choice to speak publicly probably saved my financial future and my mental health. I also wanted you to know that you're not alone. There are more of us out there than anyone realizes, and stories, like yours, help us recognize that we deserve better. I kept that letter in my desk drawer and read it whenever I had moments of doubt about the path I'd chosen. Because there were moments of doubt, especially during family-oriented holidays or when I saw social media posts from friends spending time with their extended families. I sometimes wondered if I'd been too harsh, if there had been some middle ground I could have found that would have preserved the relationships while still protecting my boundaries. But then I would look at Emma, now crawling and babbling and developing her own little personality, and I knew I'd made the right choice. She would grow up in a home where love wasn't conditional on financial transactions, where family gatherings weren't disguised fundraising events, and where no was accepted as a complete sentence. Derek and I had started saving for her college fund, a real college fund this time, not money that would mysteriously disappear into someone else's emergency. We'd also begun planning for our own future, a larger house eventually, maybe another child, definitely some travel once Emma was older. For the first time in years, we were making plans based on our own dreams rather than our relatives' crises. The most unexpected blessing came 6 months later, when I received a LinkedIn message from someone whose name I vaguely recognized, David Chen, Margaret's legal partner. Diane, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly, but I wanted to let you know that your case has become something of a landmark precedent in Illinois family law. The comprehensive documentation you provided and the variety of charges we were able to pursue has created a template that other attorneys are using to help clients in similar situations. He went on to explain that the legal strategies developed for my case were being taught in continuing education courses for family law attorneys, and that the restraining order language had been adopted by courts in 3 other states as a model for protecting victims of family financial abuse. Your decision to fight back didn't just protect you and your daughter, David wrote. It's helping protect families across the country who are dealing with similar manipulation and abuse. I printed that message and put it next to Sarah's letter in my desk drawer. Reminders that sometimes the hardest decisions create ripple effects far beyond what we can see at the time. That evening, as I was putting Emma to bed in her nursery, I looked around at the room Derek and I had prepared with such love and anticipation. Every piece of furniture, every soft toy, every carefully chosen book represented money we'd been able to spend on our own family, instead of someone else's crisis. Emma looked up at me with Derek's dark eyes and my stubborn chin, and I made her a promise. She would never have to choose between having a family and having boundaries. She would never be made to feel guilty for her success or responsible for other people's poor decisions. And if anyone ever tried to treat her like an ATM machine, they'd have to go through me first. 2 years later, on Emma's 2nd birthday, I received the phone call I'd been dreading since the restraining orders were put in place. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Dr. Kenneth Phillips from Riverside General Hospital. The voice on the other end was professional, but carried an undercurrent of urgency. I'm calling about your father, Robert Morrison. You're listed as his emergency contact. My stomach dropped. Despite everything that had happened with Patricia, Josh, and Elizabeth, Dad had never been directly involved in the financial manipulation. He was more of a passive participant, someone who Patricia spoke for rather than someone who actively participated in the schemes. What's happened? I asked, gesturing to Derek to take Emma into the other room so I could focus on the call. Your father suffered a massive heart attack this morning. He's currently in our cardiac ICU, and his condition is critical. The next 48 hours will be crucial for his recovery. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of a family crisis settling on my shoulders. But this time, it was different. This wasn't a manufactured emergency designed to extract money. This was real, and it involved the one family member I still had genuine affection for. Is he conscious? Can he have visitors? He's sedated currently, but we're allowing immediate family members to visit during specific hours. However, I should mention that there's been some tension with other family members who've attempted to visit. Your stepmother has been quite insistent about making medical decisions on his behalf. Of course she had, even with Dad unconscious. In the ICU, Patricia was positioning herself as the primary decision-maker, despite the fact that Dad's medical power of attorney documents clearly listed me as his healthcare proxy. Dr. Phillips, I'll be there within the hour, but I need you to understand something. There are active restraining orders between myself and several family members. Hospital security should have documentation of this. I'll make sure security is aware before you arrive, he assured me. Your father's care is our priority, and we'll make sure you can visit without complications. The drive to Riverside General felt surreal. I hadn't seen any of my family members in over 2 years, and I had no idea how I'd react to encountering them in such emotionally charged circumstances. Derek insisted on coming with me, and we arranged for his mother to watch Emma. You don't have to face this alone, he said as we pulled into the hospital parking lot. Restraining order or not, they're going to try to manipulate this situation. He was right, of course. The moment we stepped off the elevator on the cardiac floor, I spotted Elizabeth pacing near the nurse's station. She looked older, thinner, and was wearing scrubs that suggested she'd found work in healthcare somewhere. When she saw me, her face cycled through surprise, guilt, and something that might have been relief. Diane, she said, taking a hesitant step forward before stopping abruptly. I know we're not supposed to talk, but Dad— I know about Dad, I interrupted, keeping my voice level. I spoke with Dr. Phillips. How long has he been here? Since about 9 this morning. Patricia's been here the whole time, but the doctors keep asking for you specifically, something about medical power of attorney documents. I wasn't surprised. Dad had updated his healthcare directives 3 years ago, before the family situation had completely imploded. At the time, he'd told me privately that he trusted my judgment more than Patricia's when it came to medical decisions. Where is Patricia? Now? Conference room B down the hall. She's been arguing with the doctors about treatment options. Elizabeth paused, then added quietly, Diane, I know things got really bad between us, but I want you to know what we did at the hospital. When Emma was born, that was wrong. All of it was wrong. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. What I saw instead was genuine remorse and what appeared to be 2 years' worth of maturity. Thank you for saying that, I said carefully. But right, now I need to focus on Dad. Dr. Phillips met us outside Dad's room and explained the situation in detail. The heart attack had been severe, requiring emergency surgery to clear multiple blocked arteries. Dad was stable, but would need significant lifestyle changes and ongoing cardiac rehabilitation. The challenge we're facing, Dr. Phillips explained, is that your stepmother is advocating for more aggressive treatment options that frankly aren't medically necessary and carry significant risks. She seems to believe that expensive treatments are automatically better treatments. Of course she did. Even in a medical crisis, Patricia's instinct was to equate cost with quality, probably because she wasn't the one paying for it. What are you recommending? I asked. Conservative management with medication, cardiac rehab, and lifestyle modifications. It's the standard of care for his condition and has excellent outcomes. The procedures your stepmother is pushing for would be appropriate if he were 20 years younger or if conservative treatment had failed. I spent 20 minutes reviewing Dad's medical charts and test results with Dr. Phillips, asking the kinds of detailed questions that came naturally after years of analyzing complex financial data. By the end of our conversation, I was confident that the medical team's recommendations were sound. "I'll sign off on the conservative treatment plan," I told Dr. Phillips, "and I'd like to be the primary contact for all medical updates going forward." That's when Patricia emerged from conference room B like a hurricane making landfall. "Diane!" she called across the hallway, loud enough to make several nurses look up from their stations. "Thank God you're here. These doctors don't understand how important your father's health is to this family. We need to make sure he gets the best possible care, regardless of cost." Regardless of cost. Even with Dad unconscious in the ICU, her first priority was spending money. Specifically, money that would ultimately come from his insurance and savings, which meant money that would impact his long-term financial security. "Patricia, I've reviewed his treatment plan with Dr. Phillips. The recommended approach is appropriate for his condition." "Appropriate?" Her voice rose another octave. "Diane, this is your father's life we're talking about. This isn't the time to worry about money." The irony was staggering. For 3 years, every conversation with Patricia had been about money. Every family gathering, every phone call, every crisis had ultimately revolved around financial considerations. Now she was accusing me of being money-focused for making medically sound decisions. "This isn't about money," I said calmly. "It's about what's medically appropriate for a 72-year-old man recovering from cardiac surgery." "You don't understand," Patricia pressed. "The experimental treatments, the private specialists, we can afford it. Your father has insurance, and if that's not enough, I'm sure the family can help cover any additional costs." There it was. Even at this moment, even with Dad fighting for his life, Patricia was already calculating how to extract money from the family to pay for unnecessary medical procedures. "Patricia, I'm not going to authorize treatments that carry unnecessary risks just because they're expensive." "Fine," she snapped, her mask of concern slipping. "But don't expect me to stay quiet if something happens to him because you were too cheap to pay for proper care." The accusation hung in the air between us, and I realized something profound. Her words had no power over me anymore. 2 years ago, being called cheap or selfish by Patricia would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and self-doubt. Now, it just sounded like noise. "Patricia, I'm going to visit with Dad now. I suggest you take some time to process what the doctors have told you about his condition." I walked into Dad's room, leaving her standing in the hallway, probably for the first time in years without having gotten her way through emotional manipulation. Dad looked smaller than I remembered, pale and connected to monitors that beeped steadily beside his bed. I pulled a chair close and took his hand, surprised by how fragile it felt. "Hey, Dad," I said softly. "It's Diane. I'm here, and you're going to be okay." Over the next 3 days, I maintained a careful vigil at the hospital, coordinating with doctors, reviewing treatment plans, and making sure Dad received appropriate care. Patricia continued her campaign for expensive interventions, but without my authorization, the medical team stuck to evidence-based treatments. Josh appeared on the second day, looking haggard and genuinely worried about Dad. Unlike Elizabeth's apology, he didn't acknowledge the past conflict, but he also didn't create any drama. He simply asked about Dad's condition and accepted my updates without argument. "I know we can't really talk because of the legal stuff," he said quietly as we stood outside Dad's room. "But I wanted you to know that I'm glad you're here. Dad always said you were the one with the best judgment in the family." It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I was likely to get from Josh, and honestly, it was enough. We weren't going to become close again, but we could coexist peacefully in Dad's room while he recovered. Dad woke up on the third day, groggy but alert enough to recognize me. His first words were typically practical. "Diane, did you sign the papers for the bypass surgery Patricia keeps talking about?" "No, Dad. The doctors say you don't need bypass surgery. The angioplasty they did when you came in cleared the blockages. You just need medication and cardiac rehab." He nodded slowly. "Good. Patricia means well, but she always thinks more expensive. Means better. You've got a good head for this stuff. That afternoon, Dr. Phillips confirmed that Dad was stable enough to be moved to a regular room and would likely be discharged within a week. The crisis was over, and he was expected to make a full recovery with proper lifestyle management. As I gathered my things to leave that evening, Elizabeth approached me one more time. "Diane, I know I don't have any right to ask this, but would you consider letting me send Emma a birthday card? Not asking for contact or anything like that, just I'd like her to know she has an aunt who thinks about her." I looked at Elizabeth, really looked at her for the first time in years. The desperation and entitlement that had characterized her behavior during our worst conflicts seemed to have been replaced by something quieter and more genuine. "You can send a card to my office address," I said finally. "Nothing with your return address. Nothing that references family drama. Just a simple birthday card. If there are any attempts to use that as a way to initiate broader contact, it stops. Immediately." "I understand," she said quickly. "Thank you." Driving home that night, I reflected on how different this family crisis had felt compared to the years of manufactured emergencies that had preceded it. When faced with a real medical situation, I'd be able to step up and make appropriate decisions without being manipulated or emotionally abused. I'd protected Dad's medical and financial interests while maintaining the boundaries that protected my own family. Most importantly, I'd proven to myself that cutting off the cycle of financial abuse didn't mean abandoning my responsibilities to people I genuinely cared about. I could still be there for Dad without enabling Patricia's manipulative behavior or sacrificing my own family's well-being. 6 months later, Dad was doing well with his cardiac rehabilitation program. We'd established a new pattern of communication, monthly phone calls where we talked about his health, Emma's milestones, and Derek's work, carefully avoiding any topics that might involve Patricia's financial schemes or family drama. It wasn't the close relationship we'd had before everything fell apart, but it was genuine and free from manipulation. For the first time in years, our conversations were about actual care and concern rather than hidden agendas or financial extraction. And Emma, now a curious 2-year-old with her own strong opinions about everything, was growing up in a home where family meant love, support, and boundaries, not financial transactions disguised as obligation. The cycle was finally truly broken. But the real test of how permanently things had changed came 8 months later, when I received an unexpected call from Margaret Chen on a Thursday afternoon. "Diane, I have some interesting news," she said, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Elizabeth has contacted my office requesting a meeting, not to challenge the restraining order or ask for modifications, but to discuss something she calls making amends properly." I was immediately suspicious. What does that mean exactly? According to her attorney, she wants to discuss financial restitution for the money you gave the family over the years. She's apparently been working with a financial counselor and wants to set up a formal repayment plan. I nearly dropped the phone. Elizabeth, who had never voluntarily paid back a dime in her life, was proposing to return money I'd given up hope of ever seeing again. "Is this some kind of legal maneuver?" I asked. "I don't think so. Her attorney seems legitimate, and the paperwork they've submitted outlines specific amounts and timelines. It appears she's documented every transaction you mentioned in your original complaint and is proposing monthly payments over 5 years." The meeting took place the following week in Margaret's conference room. Elizabeth arrived with her attorney, a stack of financial documents, and what appeared to be genuine nervousness. She looked healthier than she had at the hospital, more put together, more mature, and carrying herself with a confidence I'd never seen before. "Diane, thank you for agreeing to this meeting," she began, her voice steady but careful. "I know the restraining order prohibits me from contacting you directly, so I appreciate you allowing this through our attorneys." Her attorney, a middle-aged woman named Sandra Torres, spread several documents across the conference table. "Ms. Morrison has been working with a financial counselor and therapist for the past 18 months, to address the behaviors that led to the family conflict. Part of her recovery process involves making direct amends for the financial harm she caused. Recovery process? I asked. Elizabeth's cheeks flushed slightly. After everything that happened, the arrest, the court proceedings, watching how my actions affected Dad's health, I realized I had some serious problems with money, responsibility, and boundaries. I've been in therapy and attending financial recovery meetings. She explained that the crisis surrounding Dad's heart attack had been a wake-up call. Seeing Patricia continue the same manipulative patterns, even during a genuine medical emergency, had forced Elizabeth to confront her own behavior. I realized that what we did to you wasn't just asking for help, she said, looking directly at me for the first time since entering the room. It was systematic exploitation. We turned your success into our entitlement, and we treated your generosity like it was an obligation. Sandra Torres slid a detailed spreadsheet across the table. Ms. Morrison has calculated that she received approximately $16,800 from you over 3 years. She's proposing to repay this amount at $280 per month over 5 years, with interest calculated at the current prime rate. I stared at the numbers, meticulously organized and professionally presented. Elizabeth had clearly put significant effort into documenting every transaction, every birthday gift that had been requested rather than given freely, every emergency that had somehow become my financial responsibility. Elizabeth, why are you doing this? I asked. Because I want to break the pattern, she said simply. Not just for us, but for my future relationships, for any children I might have someday. I don't want to be the person who sees other people's success as my opportunity. I want to be someone who earns my own way and helps others from a place of strength, not desperation. She went on to explain that she'd been working steadily as a medical technician for the past year and had been living within strict budgets, designed by her financial counselor. The proposed payments would come from overtime shifts and a weekend job she'd taken specifically to fund the restitution. I'm not asking for forgiveness or for the restraining order to be lifted, she continued. I understand that what we did damaged our relationship, probably beyond repair. But I need to do this for my own recovery, and honestly, you deserve to get your money back. Margaret and I excused ourselves to discuss the proposal privately. In her office down the hall, she laid out the legal implications. This is actually quite significant, Margaret explained. Financial restitution in family abuse cases is extremely rare because most perpetrators never acknowledge the harm they've caused. If Elizabeth follows through on this payment plan, it sets a powerful precedent. Do you think she's genuine? I asked. Her attorney certainly thinks so. They've provided documentation of her therapy sessions, her financial counseling records, and her employment history. This level of preparation suggests serious commitment. We returned to the conference room, and I found myself looking at Elizabeth with new eyes. The desperate, manipulative woman who had threatened to abandon me during childbirth had apparently been replaced by someone taking concrete action to repair the damage she'd caused. I'll agree to the payment plan, I said, with some modifications. I propose that the payments be made through a third-party service to avoid direct contact, and that Elizabeth commit to continuing her therapy and financial counseling for the duration of the repayment period. If she missed 3 payments, or stopped her recovery program, the agreement would be void. I also want quarterly reports from your financial counselor confirming that you're maintaining healthy money management practices, I added. This isn't just about paying me back. It's about ensuring you don't fall back into the same patterns with other people. Elizabeth agreed immediately to all the conditions. As we were finalizing the paperwork, she asked Sandra Torres to give us a moment alone. Diane, I know I don't have the right to ask about your family, but would you tell me about Emma? I think about her sometimes, about what kind of aunt I could have been if I hadn't been so focused on my own problems. I pulled out my phone and showed her a recent photo of Emma at the park, her dark curls flying as she ran toward the camera with her arms outstretched. She's beautiful, Elizabeth said softly. She looks like you did when we were kids, happy and fearless. She is happy, I said. She's growing up knowing that love doesn't come with financial strings attached. That's what she deserves, Elizabeth said. That's what you deserve from us, and I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that. The first payment arrived exactly 30 days later, deposited electronically through the third-party service we'd arranged. $280 represented more than just money. It represented Elizabeth's commitment to becoming a different person than she'd been before. Over the following months, the payments continued like clockwork. Every quarter, I received reports from Elizabeth's financial counselor confirming that she was maintaining her budget, continuing therapy, and building healthy financial habits for the first time in her adult life. More surprisingly, I began to feel something I hadn't expected: pride in Elizabeth's progress. The sister who had once spent every conversation calculating how much money she could extract was apparently becoming someone who took responsibility for her actions and honored her commitments. Meanwhile, Josh had taken a different approach to processing the family breakdown. Rather than pursuing formal restitution, he'd simply disappeared from everyone's life entirely. According to Elizabeth's quarterly updates to our attorneys, he'd moved to Arizona and was working construction for a company that specialized in renewable energy projects. He never talks about the money stuff, Elizabeth reported through her attorney. But he did say once that watching Dad in the hospital made him realize how much time we'd wasted fighting about things that didn't really matter. Patricia, predictably, had learned nothing from the experience. According to Dad's monthly phone calls, she continued to pressure him for expensive medical treatments, luxury home modifications allegedly for his health, and elaborate vacation plans disguised as cardiac rehabilitation. She's been researching experimental heart treatments in Switzerland, Dad told me during one of our calls. Keeps talking about how we should spare no expense for my health, but somehow all these treatments happen to be in places she's always wanted to visit. Are you considering any of it? I asked. Not a chance, Dad chuckled. My cardiologist here is excellent, and frankly, the best thing for my heart is avoiding the stress of Patricia's schemes. I've been thinking about talking to an attorney about protecting my assets if something happens to me. That conversation led to Dad updating his will and establishing a trust that would ensure Patricia couldn't squander his savings on questionable investments or luxury purchases after his death. I helped him research elder law attorneys and accompanied him to several consultations. I want to make sure there's something left for Emma's education, he explained as we reviewed trust documents. And honestly, I don't want Patricia turning my death into another fundraising opportunity for whatever crisis she's manufactured by then. The process of helping Dad protect his financial future felt completely different from the years of enabling family dysfunction. This was genuine assistance, helping someone I cared about make wise decisions rather than bailing someone out of self-created problems. By Emma's third birthday, the transformation in our family dynamics was complete. Elizabeth was halfway through her restitution payments and had been promoted to a supervisory position at the medical facility where she worked. Josh had apparently found stability in Arizona and was engaged to a woman who, according to Elizabeth, had no idea about his previous financial problems because he'd learned to live within his means. Dad was healthy, financially secure, and had begun setting boundaries with Patricia that protected both his health and his assets. And Patricia herself had apparently found new targets for her manipulation, focusing her attention on her daughter from her first marriage and that woman's family. Some people never change, Margaret observed during our final legal consultation, as we closed Elizabeth's restitution case. But some people do. And your willingness to give Elizabeth a structured opportunity to make amends might have saved her from a lifetime of destructive patterns. As I drove home that day, I reflected on the unexpected journey our family had taken. 4 years earlier, I'd been trapped in a cycle of financial abuse that was slowly destroying my ability to build a secure future for my own family. The decision to document their behavior, pursue legal protection, and maintain firm boundaries had seemed harsh at the time. But it had accomplished something I never could have imagined. It had forced everyone in the family to confront their own behavior and make conscious choices about who they wanted to be. Elizabeth had chosen growth and responsibility. Josh had chosen distance and self-sufficiency. Dad had chosen wisdom and protection. Patricia had chosen to remain unchanged and seek new victims, and I had chosen to prioritize my daughter's future over my family's dysfunction. That evening, as Derek and I tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at me with those serious dark eyes and asked, "Mommy, why don't we see Aunt Elizabeth anymore?" It was the first time she'd asked about extended family, and I realized she was old enough to start understanding basic concepts about relationships and boundaries. Sometimes people make choices that hurt other people, I explained carefully. When that happens, we have to protect ourselves and the people we love most. Like how I can't play with toys that are broken and might hurt me? She asked. Exactly. Like that? I said, impressed by her intuitive understanding. We love people, but we also have to make sure we're safe. And we're safe now? She asked. I looked around her nursery, the room Derek and I had prepared with such hope and anxiety 4 years earlier. The furniture we'd bought with money that wasn't being extracted by family emergencies. The books we'd chosen without worrying about who might need our savings next. The college fund was growing steadily because it wasn't being depleted by other people's crises. Yes, sweetheart, I said, kissing her forehead. We're safe now, and we're going to stay that way. As I turned off her light and closed her door, I realized that the greatest gift I'd given Emma wasn't the money I'd saved by setting boundaries with my family. It was the example I'd set by refusing to accept treatment that diminished my worth as a person. She would grow up knowing that love and money were separate things, that family relationships should be based on mutual respect rather than financial exploitation, and that saying no was sometimes the most loving thing you could do, both for yourself and for the people trying to use you. The cycle wasn't just broken. It had been replaced with something better. A new family legacy built on genuine care, healthy boundaries, and the understanding that true prosperity comes from protecting what matters most rather than sacrificing it to maintain relationships that don't deserve to survive. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.